All right, welcome to Family.
No, you're good. Keep rolling with it, man.
Oh yeah, Joe, you can cut it out, can't you?
We can cut it out. Start
All
all
right,
over.
ready? We'll clap again.
What's that, Kid Reese? All right, welcome to Peace of Mind Radio podcast. I am Brian, I think. That's Chris and that's Eric. All right, so beginning of that didn't start off very well. So who knows what this is going to be like, but anyway, we'll make the best of it. All right, so last week we did a piece on, which is actually a really cool piece. We did it on sort of the negative news. So if you, and how it affects the market, or how it affects the market, how it affects a person. The consumer that's consuming that data. So if you want to know more about that, go back and look to last week's podcast. And if you want that article, by the way, Eric posted it in the body of that link or whatever it is.
And you can find it if you go to the blog section of our website and find that entry, and I'll have it linked there as well.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, so it's very, very cool. It's one of the more interesting we've done in a while. All right, so last week we set up this week. So what we're going to do is we got a real case scenario.
Yeah.
Okay, is that the best way to put it?
Real case, yeah.
Real case scenario. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk through, and by the way, we get this kind of thing all the time. Client walks in the door and says, hey, here's my particular situation, and it's up to us to sort of evaluate, their income sources, their expense, their debt, and sort of walk through giving them advice around how to achieve whatever it is they're trying to achieve, right? So how to pay down debt, how to save more. I mean, you name it. We come up with all kinds of different strategies on how that works, right? So what I thought we'd do is and from time to time in our podcast, we'll talk about a particular scenario that happens with a client, right?
Yeah.
Oh, this particular client had this, and then we kind of yak about it. So what I thought we'd do is take this scenario and let's just talk about it, right? And if this were a real person that literally walked in the door today, what type of advice would we give them, and how do we think they could better their situation?
Cool.
Okay?
Let's do it.
All right, so here's the situation. Let's say John and Jane Smith are the two people that I always like to use. I'm not going to be using Jimmy the pool boy. That's for a totally different situation. Or Sally the bartender.
Great story, though.
Or Sally the bartender, which are two of my favorites. All right, so what we've got is we've got a couple. Okay, we'll say they're 55 years old.
All right.
And together they make $34,000 a year.
Okay.
Okay? Mm-hmm. All right, we're following that. All right, $34,000 a year. When we asked them to do their budget, so we asked them to do a budget. They sent their budget in. We looked at it, and we said, give us sort of what your monthly spend rate is, right?
Okay.
So we looked at that, and they spend about $67,000 a year.
Whoops.
Yeah.
Bit of a gap there.
Yeah.
A little bit of a gap, yep. Which from time to time, there's ways around that, right? I mean, so what this couple does is they borrow, right? Yep. They just go out and borrow money every year to fund the difference between their income and their monthly spend rate.
Well, I guess that's okay if you control your income and can give yourself a raise. So,
that's true.
So let's talk about their income.
Yeah. Okay, so their total overall debt, all their debt combined is $282,000
On a $34,000 a year income.
There you go.
I know the solution.
Yeah.
Pray.
Yeah. Well. Okay. All right. That may work. All right. And they have. So then we went a step further and said, okay, if you had to liquidate something, do you got anything you could just liquidate to create liquidity to then pay off? And there's no liquidity. All their assets are basically illiquid.
All right.
They have some assets, but pretty much illiquid. Can't get to it. Couldn't really sell it. Doesn't make sense to sell it for lots and lots of reasons. So we'll say that assets are completely out of the question. Okay. Mm-hmm. No 401k savings at all.
Wow.
No retirement savings at all. It's pretty much that's their situation. Mm-hmm. So quick review. $34,000 a year in income, $67,000 a year in spending. It's what they spend every month. And that's non-negotiable, by the way.
Right.
They're not. And actually that probably goes up. We'll get there in a second. And they have $282,000 a year in debt.
Okay.
So really, if we look at it, the difference between, say it's about $33,000. So the difference there, they're just compounding on top of their debt. Really, all that's happening, right? Okay. So that's plain Jane scenario. Oh, and we'll give them credit. Their income does go up about 3% a year.
All right.
Okay.
Okay.
That's okay. I didn't get we didn't figure out the percentage of expenses that go up every year, but I'm guessing it's at least 3%, if not more.
Right.
Would you guys agree?
Probably, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, but if their expenses are already double their income, it's going to take at least 20 years on a 3% growth rate on your income to even get back to your expenses as they currently stand. And if you're adding on to your expenses every year, then
which means they're compounding at a faster rate.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's compounded in an unbelievable rate.
Yep.
Okay. All right. So, given those three scenarios, and there's other factors in there too, but let's just based on easy factors. Chris, what is sort of step one? Client sitting in a room with you, you're saying what to them first of all?
Wow. I mean,
Okay,
that's the first
that.
thing that I'm thinking is just,
sure.
my gosh.
Yeah.
Okay, so when I've got a debt to income ratio like this, the first thing that I'm going to look at is we got to do multiple things. We got to get our income level up. You're never going to get this debt paid off if you don't get that income level up, right? And we're not talking about going from $34,000 to $35,000. We got to get it up, and we got to get it way up.
Go get a second job.
Yeah,
go
or
do
a
something.
third or a fourth job. You need to be working 23 hours a day, 8 days a week.
Yeah. Yep.
So that'd be my first thing is we got to increase revenue.
Yep.
The first thing I'd probably tell them is you can't really afford to pay me right now.
Yeah, that's it.
You need to focus.
Well,
you need to focus.
True. All right, that's very true.
You need to control what you can control, and if you can't control spending, then we have a problem. And the only alternative is to increase your revenue, increase your income. But where you can find opportunities to cut spending, that's mandatory, right?
Absolutely.
So
yeah, I would say spending is probably the number one thing here. Right?
Yeah, I agree.
There's not much they can do with their debt because it kind of is what it is. It's all long-term debt. So it's not really like you can go back and refinance all that, although that is a possibility, but probably not really. Spending is what it is. I would say that their spending is probably increasing no matter what. No matter what, it's going up. It regardless of what the income is, spending is continuing to increase. And my guess is, again, we didn't go back and do the percentage of what their expenses increase every year, but my guess is it's probably more than the 3% growth of their income. Would you guys not agree?
it's probably one of those clients too that talks about when you talk about cutting spending, they're not talking about cutting spending based on their current rate. They're talking about cutting spending based on future increases.
Right.
In spending.
I'm just not going to increase as fast as I was.
Yes.
Yeah, that's right.
But you're still increasing.
Okay, so given that they don't want to work a second job, given that expenses are not going to go away, they're probably increasing at a faster rate. Mm-hmm. They have this debt problem. What else advice would you give them? I mean, let's be honest. What would be a piece of advice?
It sounds to me like they're not willing to give. Right?
Well, that's true. Yeah,
they're not willing to be flexible with what they're doing. So if you're in a situation like this, and this is a nightmare, and you're not willing to be flexible on something, you're not willing to work a second, third, fourth job, you're not willing to cut expenses, and to Eric's point, not just the increase in expenses, but to cut the actual expenses. If you're not willing to be flexible with those things, there's nothing that you can do with them. To me, that's a client that I'm not going to take on as a client.
Yeah,
because I can't help them.
Well, yeah, I would agree.
Plus, they can't afford to pay us.
And they can't afford to pay us.
Yeah. Well, they'll just keep borrowing to pay you.
Yeah, they're going to keep borrowing to pay us, which, I got a fiduciary issue with doing that.
Yeah. Well, look, at the end of the day, if this were a client that walked in the door, and I know I said it was a client, I think I may have said it was a client. It's not a client. But at the end of the day, if this were a real client and they walked in the door, we'd literally, one of my suggestions would be, you said earlier, you'd almost have to file bankruptcy.
This is bankruptcy, yeah.
Yeah, this is one of those cases. I don't like that because I think if you borrowed the money, you ought to be obligated to pay it back no matter what's going on. But I get it. Some people fall in certain situations, and it's just irreversible.
The bankruptcy laws are there for a reason.
That's right. Yeah, but in this case, there's zero chance that bankruptcy is going to be done.
Yeah.
And does anybody want to share why that it's
because
not an option?
This is not a real client, but it is a real entity.
It is a real entity.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let me give you some other. Well, no, we'll go ahead and all right. We'll disclose who it is, and then we'll go through some other. So really, if you think about it, what we just described was our country.
Yeah.
Right. So our country takes on about $3.4 trillion a year in income. They spend about $6.7 trillion is the budget this year, and then we have $28 trillion. Is it $28 trillion? I can't. Yep. Anyway, we whacked off a bunch of zeros. That's what.
Yeah, it's 28 trillion.
28 trillion in debt.
Over a year ago, it was 21 trillion.
Yeah, so we're 28 trillion in debt. So, and we have no liquid assets, right? So there's no, they're not going to sell a national park, or I guess they could. They could probably sell some government buildings or whatever, but
sell government-owned land, things like that. There are some things, but they're not super liquid. You'd have to change the law.
Yeah. So here's the thing. I mean, when we were talking about this earlier, when we started talking about doing this, the income is really the only thing that can be adjusted here, and that's what we're seeing out of this current administration, right? We're seeing increase in taxes, increase in taxes, increase in taxes. However, keep in mind that when you're listening to that, and again, this goes back to the negative news that we talked about last week.
Right.
So if you didn't listen to it, go back and listen to that podcast. But here's the thing. You can take whatever increase in taxes you want, and you can say we're going to tax the wealthy, and you can cut it off at $500,000 a year in income or $1 million. It makes no difference. You can't tax those that make more than $500,000 enough. You could 100% tax 100% of their dollars, which means takes every penny they make, and you still wouldn't touch anywhere near the deficits that we're running up. You just wouldn't. It's just not possible.
Well, Eric brought it up a while ago. We saw this on the news the other day. They were running the statistic, and correct me if I'm remembering it wrong. If you took every billionaire in the United States and you took 100% of their assets, it wouldn't even come close.
Of the national.
Yeah, it wouldn't even come close.
Yeah.
It wouldn't cover the budget, I don't think.
Probably not.
Yeah, I mean it's
it would not at all.
You just can't. The spending is far beyond that capability.
Yeah. So again, when you hear taxes, increased taxes, which is really the only avenue here. Let's be honest. You're not we're not going to decrease spending. That's never going to happen. Our debt is probably never going to get paid off. We'll just continue to borrow debt. So the only avenue we have in this scenario is to increase revenue, and the only way to do that is to tax. And let's be honest. If we're saying that we're going to tax the wealthy, and so let's just say everybody makes over $1 million, which the majority of those are not celebrities, okay, that you think of, or NBA players or NFL players, whatever, they're small business owners, right? They are not going to just take this increase in taxes on the chin and say, you know what, by golly, I'm all for the American people. I'm just going to let them tax me. They're going to pass that along to everybody else.
Yeah.
Let's be honest. So when they say they're going to increase taxes, everybody's getting an increase in
expenses.
Well,
they're going to pass on the expense, but these are the people who are financially sophisticated enough to find ways around.
Well, yeah, that's
all the legal loopholes that are built into the law.
Yeah, for sure.
So it's you can talk a good game all you want, but it's realistically it's not going to happen to the people that they're targeting.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So here's a couple more interesting statistics I thought that we talk about. So budget items. This is something that when all of us go through and we look at a client that comes in. Literally, this is a real client I'm talking about now. When they come in and we go, hey, you need to do a budget because we have to understand what your monthly spend rate is. Typically, that's what's a person's most expensive budget item?
Usually their house.
Yeah,
mortgage,
right?
Sure.
Yeah, so their mortgages, and we say that mortgage should be anywhere between 25 to 28% of your gross income, right? In that
max out about 30 ideally. But
it's something like that. So if the income of the United States is $3.4 trillion,
right?
Medicare alone is $1.3 trillion of that. $1.3 trillion.
With the population that's living longer every year.
So that's going to get worse.
Yeah. That's not where they borrowed the money. That's not even debt at that point.
Right.
We're just talking about an obligation. Yeah. Which I've got a funny story about Medicare in a second. Social Security, $1.1 trillion. I actually thought Social Security would be higher than Medicare, but it's not. Mm-mm. That's surprising. When I got these numbers, I was actually shocked that Medicare was higher than Social Security. $725 billion for defense. I'm fine paying that all day long because I want my country defended. I want my rights defended, my freedoms and all that. Interest on the debt, $400 trillion. 400 billion. Sorry.
Yeah, I said 400 trillion.
Now we're talking bigger numbers than I can even spit out. So 400 million is what we pay just in interest.
That's interest alone per year.
Just interest alone. Yep. So if you look at any of those numbers, the interest alone, I don't know, I had to do the quick math. It's about 10% or so. Mm-hmm. So, but that's just interest. This is not even talking about paying back the debt. So really, if you look at paying back the debt, it'd probably be in the 20-25% range, which in all reality, that's about what we say a mortgage is, right? Isn't that 25 to 30%? But then you add on all this other debt, that's where it starts to really add up. But here's a funny story about Medicare. So I've got a client who literally we have to schedule meetings, and we see him twice a year or 3 times in some cases. We literally have to schedule meetings around his doctor's appointments.
Yep.
So we were in here one day, we were joking around, and he says, and maybe I've said this on another podcast, and he's like, I said, how much do you pay for Medicare? We were talking about Medicare, and he's like, I pay $400 and something a month, whatever, for Medicare. I'm like, that's unbelievable. And you go to the doctor, literally he's at the doctor almost every day. I pay, and I go to the doctor once a year for my annual checkup, and I pay $400 a month or I don't know, Mr. Producer, we're the same, $360 something. All right, so $360 a month for catastrophic coverage.
Yeah.
That's it. So the numbers just flat out don't work. Yeah. And that's another podcast to show how numbers, even the Social Security system, they just don't work. But anyway, that's a totally different story. Now, here's some other statistics that are pretty interesting. Liabilities. So this is not debt. This is not current budget items. These are liabilities that you're obligated to pay at somewhere down the road. Chris brought up an interesting thing. We're going to say Social Security. I get it. We don't want to look at that as a liability because people said, no, that's just a refund of what I paid in.
Right.
So you can't look, but because you paid in, the government's already spent that money. So it is on their books, right, as a liability. They owe you this return. So liabilities, $21 trillion in Social Security benefits. Okay. Medicare, $32 trillion. I'm surprised that Medicare is more. I'm shocked. But I mean, I shouldn't be.
Actually,
but
I think it makes sense though, if you think about the cost of medical care. You know, the technology is advancing, and so is the expense so rapidly. That's why that number is bigger.
Well, you also have to remember, you turn 65, you're most of the time going straight to Medicare, where you can delay Social Security payments until 70 years
That's absolutely true.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Unfunded liabilities. I'm assuming this is all the liabilities, including my kids and Social Security, their Medicare, you name it. 100. I giggle because it's so silly. It's $147 trillion. I don't know how they can calculate all that, but here's the most interesting statistic that I found on the website, and that is liabilities per citizen of the United States.
Yeah.
So if you took all of our liabilities, this is all the debt and everything else, if you calculate it all together, you divide it by the number of U.S. citizens, it's $443,000 per citizen. That's staggering. But it's also even more staggering is savings per family. Okay, so family is a family like of 4, right?
Yeah.
But think of it this way. If you had a family of 4, the liabilities of the government is 1.2. Well, let's
family
see, 4 times 4 would be like 1.7, 1.8. Am I doing the math right? 4 times 4 would be
close enough.
Yeah. So it'd be 16. But
the
1.7 trillion
of $2 million.
Yeah, there you go. And we're math.
We're
people.
financial advisors.
Yeah, we're math people. But so if you did that, so let's say it's 1.7 million. Okay, 1.7 million per family of 4. The average family of 4 in the United States savings.
This is their retirement savings, their
total
savings in the bank. This is everything.
Total savings. $34,000. It's shocking. I mean, that just tells you the disparity on how much we spend versus.
And that number is actually a lot higher now than what it was just a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
Well, just last year. Well, the savings rate last year increased by like 8% because everybody was at home, right? And you travel and all that extra miscellaneous stuff you buy. Unless it went to Amazon. But
and that's probably where a lot of the stimulus went. To be honest, is went to all that good stuff. But anyway, I guess that's the point. The reason why I bring that up is because when you look at these numbers, if you we're talking staggering numbers, billions and trillions. Like now we throw trillion or like it's nothing.
Right.
Like we did 20 years ago around when it was billions.
Billions, right.
But the whole point is that these numbers are so large. We have to address all this at some point. I don't know if it's going to be during my lifetime. It'll certainly be during my kids' lifetime. But the whole point behind this is you cannot rely on the federal government to support your retirement lifestyle.
Agreed.
That's kind of the point behind all this. So you need to make sure that you're saving enough throughout your life to make sure you accumulate the assets so that when you get into retirement, you can live the life you want and not run out of money. That's where we can help you out. We certainly do that with clients all day long, every day. Whether you're 20 years old, 25, 35, 65, 75, makes no difference what stage of life you're in. We can certainly help you out. Because even 70-year-olds, which Chris teaches a program for rejuvenate your retirement.
Yeah.
It's more so, hey, taking a fresh look at where you are in retirement. And if there's anything you can do to preserve assets, to extend assets, to protect assets, we've got all those strategies. So it doesn't matter what phase of life you're in. If you want us to help you out, we'd be happy to help you out. Mr. Producer there is going to throw up our contact information because I forgot that the last time.
Right.
So we're going to make sure we get that up there this time.
But we better say it out loud for the people who are just listening and not
that's true. Go ahead.
Okay. So if you want to reach out to us, phone number is 502-200-5210 or info@fwppartners.com. Or probably the easiest way is just go to the website.
Go to the website and, schedule a meeting.
Everything's there.
Top right-hand corner.
Yep. So this is one podcast called Peace of Mind Radio Podcast. It's awesome. We talk strictly financial-related topics. We also have a podcast that is purely for individuals or business owners and entrepreneurs. It's called Connecting the Commonwealth. Really, really cool. We just shot one this morning, which we mentioned last week on the show. So it's pretty cool. And that's kind of a Google-ish business, right?
The one that we did this morning, that's all about it's
marketing online.
It's marketing and
advertising.
advertising. Yeah.
So anyway, make sure you tune in. Carrie's pretty cool. She's got a cool business. So anyway, tune into that. And we also have a third one. It's called Burgers and Bourbon. That's the one that everybody's kind of fancy about around here. We love it. We love doing them.
Well, let's be real honest. It's fun.
It's fun. It has nothing to do with anything other than we just turn and we eat a burger and give you our opinion. We drink a bourbon and give you our opinion. That's the purpose behind the whole thing. So anyway, thanks for watching another week of listening to Peace of Mind Radio Podcast. Next week, we'll have another topic. I don't know what it's going to be. We haven't picked it out yet, but we'll come up with one. And if you got any suggestions, make sure you send them to us. And then I'll let Eric sign us off because I can never remember what he says.
Make sure you listen, subscribe, rate, and review. Appreciate a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts. And if you're watching on YouTube, click that little, give us a nice little rating and leave a comment and leave us a review. Appreciate it.
Have a good week, everybody.
The information given herein is taken from sources at IFP Advisors, LLC, doing business as Independent Financial Partners, IFP, IFP Securities, doing business as IFP, and its advisors believed to be reliable, but it is not guaranteed by us as to accuracy or completeness. This is for informational purposes only, and in no event should be construed as an offer to sell or solicitation of an offer to buy any securities or products. Please consult your tax and/or legal advisor before implementing any tax and/or legal-related strategies mentioned in this publication, as IFP does not provide tax and/or legal advice. Opinions expressed are subject to change without notice and do not take into account the particular investment objectives, financial situation, or needs of individual investors. This report may not be reproduced, distributed, or published by any person for any purpose without IFP's express prior written consent. Securities offered through IFP Securities, LLC, doing business as Independent Financial Partners, IFP, member of FINRA and SIPC. Investment advice offered through IFP Advisors, doing business as IFP, a registered investment advisor. IFP and Family Wealth Planning Partners are not affiliated. The information given herein is taken from sources that IFP Advisors, LLC, doing business as IFP, IFP Securities, LLC, doing business as IFP, and its advisors believe to be reliable, but it is not guaranteed by us as to accuracy or completeness. This is for informational purposes only, and in no event should be construed as an offer to sell or solicitation of an offer to buy any securities or products. Please consult your tax and/or legal advisor before implementing any tax and/or legal-related strategies mentioned in this publication, as IFP does not provide tax and/or legal advice. Opinions expressed are subject to change without notice and do not take into account the particular investment objectives, financial situation, or needs of individual investors.